come, my dear.
At last. How could you? Pathetic. I will not break.
The wedding was a lie, and everyone knew it except the bride. I stood in the grand entrance hall of Ashworth Manor, still wearing my ivory wedding gown, watching my husband of 3 hours escort his young ward up the main staircase. His hand rested possessively on the small of her back. She glanced over her shoulder at me with triumph gleaming in her dark eyes. They disappeared down the corridor that led to the master chambers. My chambers. My husband's chambers. The rooms where I was supposed to spend my wedding night. The servants would not meet my eyes. They had known. Every footman, every maid, every person in this household had known what would happen tonight, and no one had warned me. I was 42 years old, a widow who had believed herself fortunate to secure a second marriage at her age, and I had walked into this humiliation with my eyes wide open and my heart full of foolish hope. The Duke of Ashworth was 53. Handsome still, distinguished, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of commanding presence that made younger men seem insubstantial. He had courted me with flattering attention, promised me companionship and respect, spoken of wanting a mature woman who could be a true partner. I had believed him. I had believed every word, even as warning signs accumulated like storm clouds on the horizon. The way his ward, Miss Arabella Pemberton, 19 years old and breathtakingly beautiful, watched me with barely concealed hostility during our engagement. The way servants fell silent when I entered rooms. The way the Duke's elderly mother, the Dowager Duchess, looked at me with something that might have been pity. I had ignored it all because I wanted to believe. Because I was lonely. Because I was 42 and terrified of spending the rest of my life alone. Now I stood in the entrance hall of my new home, abandoned on my wedding night, and I had a choice to make. I could weep. I could rage. I could retreat to whatever secondary chamber they had prepared for the discarded bride and wait for morning, when the humiliation would continue in new and creative forms. Or I could do something unexpected. The Dowager Duchess emerged from the shadows of the drawing room, her silver hair gleaming in the candlelight. She was 78 years old, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, and she had watched the entire scene unfold without intervention. "Well," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the silent hall. "What are you going to do about it?" I looked at her, this woman who had allowed her son to perpetrate this cruelty, who had said nothing during the months of courtship when a word of warning might have saved me. "I am going to survive," I said. "And then I am going to make them regret every moment of this." The Dowager smiled a thin, approving expression that surprised me. "Good. I was hoping you would say that. If you want to know what the discarded bride did to shake the entire estate and why the Dowager Duchess chose to become her ally, subscribe right now. This channel is just beginning, and every single subscriber helps us grow. Stay with me. This story is about to take a turn no one expected. My name is Margaret Thornwood, Margaret Ashworth now, for whatever that was worth, and I had learned long ago that survival required adaptation. My first husband had died 12 years ago, leaving me with a modest income and no children to comfort my old age. I had spent the intervening years managing my small estate, involving myself in charitable work, building a life that was quiet but meaningful. I had not expected to marry again. The Duke's attention had come as a surprise. A pleasant one, or so I had believed. We had met at a house party hosted by mutual friends, and he had sought me out repeatedly, engaging me in conversations that suggested genuine interest in my thoughts and opinions. "I am tired of young women who have nothing to say," he had told me, during one of our early conversations. "I want a wife who can be a companion, not merely an ornament." I had been flattered. I had been charmed. I had allowed myself to believe that a man of his position might genuinely prefer a woman of substance over a girl of beauty. I had been a fool. But I was not going to remain one. The Dowager led me to a small sitting room on the ground floor, not the grand chambers I had been promised, but a comfortable space with a fire already burning in the hearth. "Sit," she commanded. "We have much to discuss." I sat, though every instinct screamed at me to flee this house and never return. "You are wondering why I did not warn you," she said, settling into a chair across from me. "Why I allowed my son to make you a party to this arrangement." The question had occurred to me. "I did not warn you because I needed to see what you were made of. Any woman can be gracious when circumstances favor her. I wanted to see how you would respond to adversity. So this was a test. Everything in life is a test. The dowager's eyes were cold but not unkind. My son is a weak man who has allowed himself to be manipulated by a conniving girl half his age. He believes himself in love with Arabella, but what he feels is merely infatuation, the last desperate grasping of a man who fears growing old. And you expect me to do what? Wait patiently while he comes to his senses? I expect you to fight. Not with tears or tantrums, those weapons are for children. I expect you to use the tools available to a woman of intelligence and experience. She leaned forward. You are the Duchess of Ashworth now. That is not nothing. The title carries power, influence, legal protections that my son cannot simply dismiss. He can make my life unbearable. He can try. But you would be surprised how much a determined woman can accomplish when she stops seeking approval and starts seeking victory. This is where the alliance forms. If you are feeling this moment of unexpected solidarity, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one. Subscribe, we need every single one of you to help this channel grow. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my assigned chamber, a perfectly adequate room, comfortable but clearly secondary, and I planned. The dowager had given me information during our conversation, details about the household, the estate, the legal realities of my position. I was the Duchess. That title could not be taken from me without divorce, and divorce required grounds that the Duke did not have. I had committed no adultery, no abandonment, no crime that would justify dissolving our marriage. He was trapped with me as surely as I was trapped with him. The question was how to use that trap to my advantage. In the morning, I descended to breakfast dressed in one of my finest gowns. Not the practical clothing of a woman accepting defeat, but the elegant attire of a duchess claiming her place. The servants who had avoided my eyes last night now stared openly, clearly surprised by my composure. The Duke was already seated at the head of the table. Arabella sat beside him, her position a deliberate insult. She had taken the seat that should have been mine. I smiled pleasantly and took the chair at the opposite end of the table. Good morning, Your Grace, I said, my voice perfectly cordial. I trust you slept well. The Duke had the grace to look uncomfortable. Whatever he had expected from this morning, tears, accusations, perhaps a dramatic departure, my calm demeanor clearly was not it. Lady Ashworth. Yes. Thank you. I thought we might discuss household matters today, I continued, as though nothing unusual had occurred. As the new Duchess, I should acquaint myself with the running of the estate. The housekeeper's name is Mrs. Pemberton, I believe? Any relation to Miss Arabella? The question was pointed, and everyone at the table knew it. Arabella's surname was the same as the housekeeper's, a connection I had learned from the dowager last night. My aunt, Arabella said, her voice cold. She has served this household for 15 years. How convenient. A family affair. I smiled at her with perfect politeness. I look forward to working with her. I am certain she will be most helpful in explaining how things are done here. The Duke cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss. Oh, I am certain there is much to discuss, Your Grace. But first, breakfast. I find that difficult conversations proceed better on a full stomach. I ate with deliberate calm, savoring each bite while the Duke grew increasingly agitated and Arabella's beautiful face twisted with frustration. They had expected me to be destroyed. They had expected me to slink away in shame. They had underestimated me badly. The following weeks were a battle of wills. I established myself as the Duchess of Ashworth, claiming every privilege and responsibility the position afforded. I met with the housekeeper, Arabella's aunt, who clearly wished me gone, and reviewed household accounts with meticulous attention. I discovered irregularities, expenses that could not be justified, patterns of spending that suggested someone had been skimming funds for years. I said nothing about these discoveries. Not yet. I met with the estate manager and toured the tenant farms, introducing myself as the new Duchess and listening to concerns that had apparently gone unaddressed for years. The tenants were surprised by my attention. The previous Duchess had died over a decade ago, and no one had filled her role since. I filled it now. I wrote letters, re-establishing connections with the social circles a Duchess should command. I planned events, announced my intention to host a Christmas ball, began the elaborate preparations that such an occasion required. The Duke watched all of this with growing bewilderment. "I do not understand what you are doing," he said, confronting me in the library one afternoon. "I am being your wife. Is that not what you wanted when you married me? You know what I mean. After what happened? After you spent our wedding night with your ward instead of your wife." "Yes, I am aware of what happened." I kept my voice level. "But that does not change the fact that I am the Duchess of Ashworth. This is my home now. These are my responsibilities. I intend to fulfill them. You should be angry. I am angry. But anger is a tool, Your Grace, not a master. I choose how and when to use it." He stared at me as though seeing me for the first time. "You are not what I expected." "No. I do not imagine I am." Arabella was the first to crack. She had expected to reign unchallenged, to be the Duke's favorite in everything but name, to enjoy all the privileges of being Duchess without any of the responsibilities. My presence, my calm, competent, infuriatingly persistent presence, disrupted her plans. She tried to undermine me. She gave contradictory orders to the servants, countermanding my instructions. She spread whispers among the staff, suggesting I was mentally unstable, that the Duke intended to divorce me soon. She positioned herself at the Duke's side at every opportunity, making her position in his affections obvious to everyone. I ignored her. Or rather, I appeared to ignore her while documenting every instance of her interference. The contradictory orders, the whispered campaigns, the missing household items that I strongly suspected she had taken. All of it went into a ledger I kept locked in my private chamber. The Dowager watched these proceedings with obvious approval. "You are playing a longer game than I expected," she said, during one of our now regular conversations. "I had a good teacher. My first husband was a businessman. He taught me that the best victories are the ones your opponent does not see coming. And what victory are you planning? I am not certain yet. But I know this, your son made me his Duchess. That was his choice. He will have to live with the consequences. We are at the turning point now. If you are feeling this battle of wills, share this story with someone who appreciates a woman who fights with intelligence rather than tears. Subscribe, like, comment. Every interaction helps this channel reach the people who need these stories. The Christmas ball was my first major social triumph. Every significant family in the county attended, curious to meet the new Duchess of Ashworth and to observe the dynamics of her unusual household. I had prepared meticulously, ensuring that every detail reflected the taste and competence expected of a woman of my position. The Duke was forced to escort me into the ballroom, to dance the opening dance with me as tradition demanded. Arabella watched from the sidelines, her position suddenly and publicly diminished. She was merely the ward. I was the wife. The evening was a success by any measure. The food was excellent, the decorations elegant, the entertainment refined. Guests complimented me genuinely, and I saw their assessment of the situation shift as they recognized that the new Duchess was not the pathetic figure they had expected. One guest in particular caught my attention. Lord Christopher Pemberton was Arabella's older brother. A man of perhaps 35, distinguished and intelligent, with none of his sister's scheming nature. He had travelled from London for the ball, apparently summoned by Arabella to provide support. Instead, he sought me out. "Your Grace. A pleasure to meet you at last. Lord Pemberton." I did not know Arabella had a brother. She tends not to mention me. We have differing views on many subjects. His eyes were thoughtful as they studied my face. "Including how she has conducted herself in this household. You are aware of the situation? I am aware that my sister has behaved shamefully, and that the Duke has allowed her to do so. I am also aware that you have handled this with more dignity than most women would manage. You disapprove of your sister's actions? I disapprove of cruelty in all its forms. What was done to you on your wedding night was cruel, regardless of the justifications anyone might offer." He bowed slightly. "I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family supports what has happened here, and that if you ever need assistance, you have an ally you may not have expected." I studied him. This unexpected voice of conscience in a family I had assumed was uniformly against me. "Why would you offer to help me against your own sister?" "Because right is right, Your Grace. And because I have watched Arabella manipulate her way through life for 19 years. Someone needs to teach her that actions have consequences. The alliance with Lord Pemberton proved more valuable than I could have anticipated. He provided information I could not have obtained otherwise, details about Arabella's past, her manipulation of the Duke, the financial arrangements that had been made for her benefit. He confirmed my suspicions about the housekeeper, explaining that his aunt had been installed in the position specifically to support Arabella's influence over the household. My sister sees the Duke as her path to permanent security, Christopher explained, during one of our private conversations. She has no fortune of her own, our father gambled away what little we had before his death. The Duke's attention is her only hope of escaping poverty. Then why target me? I am not preventing their relationship. You are preventing her from becoming Duchess. As long as you live and remain married, she can never be more than a mistress. That is not enough for Arabella. She wants the title, the position, the power. She cannot have them while I exist. Precisely. His expression darkened. Which is why you should be careful. My sister is not violent by nature, but she is desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. I took his warning seriously, though I did not show fear. I began taking precautions, having my food tasted before eating, locking my chamber door at night, varying my routines so that I would be difficult to predict. And I continued building my case. The financial irregularities I had discovered proved to be just the beginning. With Christopher's help, I uncovered a systematic pattern of theft. The housekeeper had been siphoning funds from the household accounts for years, directing the money to Arabella for her personal expenses. The amount was substantial enough to constitute a crime. I documented everything. I gathered evidence. I waited for the right moment to strike. That moment came 4 months after my wedding. The Duke had grown increasingly uncomfortable with my continued presence. He had expected me to accept my humiliation and retreat to obscurity. Instead, I had established myself as the undisputed mistress of his household, commanded the respect of his staff, and won the admiration of his neighbors. Arabella, by contrast, had become increasingly erratic. My refusal to be defeated drove her to greater extremes. Public tantrums, obvious manipulations, behavior that embarrassed the Duke and damaged his reputation. One evening, she went too far. I was walking in the garden after dinner when she confronted me, her beautiful face twisted with hatred. Why will you not leave? Everyone wants you gone. The Duke wants you gone. I want you gone. You have no friends here, no allies, nothing to stay for. I have my position. My title. My rights as the Duchess of Ashworth. Rights mean nothing if you cannot enforce them. You are alone here, Lady Margaret. An aging widow clinging to a marriage that was never real. She stepped closer. Leave voluntarily, and I will ensure you receive a generous settlement. Stay, and I will make your life unbearable. You have already tried that. It has not worked. I have been gentle so far. But I can be much less gentle if necessary. Is that a threat? It is a promise. I looked at this beautiful, desperate young woman and felt something unexpected, not fear, but pity. Miss Pemberton, I have something to tell you, and I want you to listen carefully. I know about the money. I know about the theft. I have documented every penny that your aunt has stolen from this household, every expense that you have incurred at the Duke's unwitting expense. Her face went white. I do not know what you are. I have the ledgers. I have the receipts. I have witnesses who will testify to what they have seen. If I choose to bring this evidence forward, you and your aunt will face criminal charges. Your brother's reputation will be damaged by association. Your prospects of any respectable future will be destroyed. You are bluffing. I never bluff. I held her gaze steadily. Leave this house. Tonight. Pack your belongings and go. I will not bring charges if you disappear quietly, but if you remain, if you threaten me again. I will destroy you utterly. Do you understand? She stared at me, and I watched her calculate the odds. Then she fled. Arabella was gone by morning. The Duke discovered her absence at breakfast and immediately demanded to know what had happened. I told him the truth, all of it. The theft, the conspiracy, the evidence I had gathered, the choice I had given his beloved ward. His face cycled through disbelief, denial, and finally a kind of exhausted acceptance. You drove her away. I gave her the opportunity to avoid criminal prosecution. She chose to take it. I loved her. You were infatuated with her. There is a difference. I set down my teacup. Your Grace, you married me believing you could have everything, a wife for respectability and a mistress for pleasure. That was never going to work. Someone was always going to be hurt. And you have ensured that the someone was Arabella. I have ensured that it was not me. Call that selfish if you wish, but I will not apologize for protecting myself. He was silent for a long moment. What happens now? That depends on you. I am willing to be a real wife to you, a partner, a companion, the Duchess you claimed to want when you proposed to me. But not while you are pining for a girl who manipulated you. Not while you resent me for surviving what you tried to do to me. You are giving me a choice. I am giving you the only choice that makes sense. We are married. Divorce would destroy both our reputations. We can either make this work, or we can spend the rest of our lives in misery. I met his eyes. I would prefer not to be miserable. Wouldn't you? The transition was not easy. The Duke grieved for Arabella, though he would not admit it. He was angry at me for driving her away, angrier at himself for the weakness that had led to this disaster. Our conversations were stilted, our interactions formal, the warmth I had once believed possible between us seemingly impossible now. But slowly, things began to change. Without Arabella's influence, the Duke began to see his household clearly for the first time. He discovered the extent of the theft, the corruption that had festered under his roof, the manipulation that had controlled his decisions for years. He was ashamed, genuinely, deeply ashamed of what he had allowed to happen. And he began to appreciate what I had done. You saved me, he said one evening, months after Arabella's departure. I did not see it that way at first, but you saved me from my own foolishness. I saved myself. Your salvation was incidental. Perhaps. But it happened nonetheless. He reached for my hand, the first genuine gesture of affection he had offered since our wedding day. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the defensive excuses I have offered before. I treated you shamefully, and you responded with dignity I did not deserve. No. You did not deserve it. But I was not gracious for your benefit. I was gracious because that is who I am. I know that now. I know many things now that I should have recognized from the beginning. He squeezed my hand. I proposed to you because I wanted a woman of substance. Then I allowed myself to be distracted by a girl who offered nothing but surface beauty. I am sorry. Apology accepted. I did not pretend the pain had disappeared, that would have been false, and we were done with falseness. But trust must be rebuilt. That will take time. I have time. However much you need. We rebuilt our marriage slowly, over years rather than months. It was not the passionate romance of young love, we were both too old, too wounded, too aware of each other's flaws for that. But it became something else, something that might have been better. A partnership between equals, built on mutual respect and hard-won understanding. The Duke became the husband he had promised to be during our courtship. He sought my counsel on estate matters, valued my opinions, treated me as the partner I had always wanted to be. The Dowager watched our transformation with satisfaction, her gamble having paid off in ways even she had not expected. I knew you would fight, she told me, on her 85th birthday. But I did not know you would win so completely. I did not win. We survived. There is a difference. Is there? I think winning and surviving are often the same thing, for women of our generation. We are not permitted the dramatic victories that men enjoy. We must content ourselves with endurance. Then I have endured. Yes. And in enduring, you have created something lasting. Lord Christopher Pemberton remained an ally, visiting regularly, becoming something like a friend to both the Duke and me. His sister Arabella had fled to the continent, where she eventually made a modest marriage to a merchant, a fate far beneath what she had schemed for, but better than the criminal prosecution she had narrowly escaped. The Duke and I never had children together, we had married too late for that possibility, but we built a family nonetheless. Nephews and nieces, godchildren and wards, the extended network of connections that aristocratic life provides. When the Duke died at 71, I was genuinely grieved, though I had not expected to be when I stood abandoned in that entrance hall 18 years before. I lived another 15 years after the Duke's death, remaining at Ashworth Manor as the Dowager Duchess, watching the estate pass to a nephew who had been well trained for his responsibilities. On my 81st birthday, surrounded by the family I had built through determination rather than blood, I told the story one last time. I was 42 years old when I married the Duke. He abandoned me on our wedding night for his young ward. I stood in the entrance hall in my wedding gown, watching them ascend the stairs together, and I made a choice. What choice, grandmother? The youngest grandniece leaned forward eagerly. I chose to survive. I chose to fight. Not with tears or tantrums, but with intelligence and endurance. I smiled at the memory. The Duke chose his ward on our wedding night. But my unexpected move shook the entire estate, and eventually, it shook him into becoming the husband he should have been from the beginning. And you forgave him? I chose to build something with him, despite what he had done. Whether that is forgiveness, I cannot say. But it was enough. It was more than enough. What is the lesson, grandmother? What should we learn from your story? The lesson is simple. I looked around at these young women, these future wives and mothers who would face their own challenges. You cannot control what others do to you. You can only control how you respond. And if you respond with dignity, with intelligence, with the determination to survive no matter what, you will be surprised by what you can accomplish. The Duke had chosen his ward on their wedding night. But his bride's unexpected move had shaken the entire estate. And from the ashes of that humiliation, she had built a life worth living, proof that the battles we win through endurance are often the most important victories of all. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. If it moved you, if it reminded you that survival can be victory and dignity can be a weapon, please subscribe. This channel is just beginning, and every single subscriber helps us grow. Share this with someone who needs to hear that fighting back does not always mean fighting loud. Comment where you are watching from. I read every single one, and I want to say hello to you. Like this video. Subscribe to our channel. Help us reach the people who need these stories. Until next time, remember, the battles you win through endurance are often the most important victories of all.